It's Friday, the 31st of March. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. And on Wednesday, the 29th of March at 10 p.m., 9 service members lost their lives in a formation training exercise out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, while under night vision goggles. Here's what we know so far. According to the Army Times, 9 soldiers were killed when 2 HH60 Black Hawk helicopters flying out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky crashed Wednesday evening. The crash occurred about 10 p.m. on a routine training mission. The division's Deputy Commanding General, Brigadier General John Lubas, said that the crews were training on flying a 2-aircraft formation with night vision goggles. He added that the helicopters were medical evacuation variants of the Black Hawk. So the question I have for the Black Hawk community is, those of you that are flying medevac missions, is this a standard square to fill in your regular training syllabus? Is that you need to remain current and qualified in formation flying at night with night vision goggles? Is this something you regularly train for? And does this also include, would this also be considered low-level night formation with NVGs? One witness who lives near the crash site told the outlet he heard a pop and 2 booms. Another witness said that he sees the helicopters flying over Fort Campbell Pass overhead often, but that the 2 that flew by on Wednesday stood out. He said, "I told my wife, wow, those look really close tonight." For whatever reason, about a minute later, they were coming across and there was a large explosion in the sky, almost like a firework went off, and then the entire tree line lit up. So it sounds like this was a mid-air collision between the 2 Black Hawk helicopters. Inclement weather does not appear to be a factor according to weather reports at the time of the crash, and they did have good moonlight for the flight at that time, at that date. That is good moonlight for the night vision goggles to perform well. And then they mentioned the previous crash in February of the Black Hawk helicopter that was doing the instrument approach into the local airport there at Huntsville, Alabama. Let's check that out too. According to local news channel Sky 5, they're placing the crash site out here off of Bobby Light Road in relatively flat, I would say, rolling terrain here in Kentucky at about the 600-foot elevation. That would put the crash site just east of the Cumberland River, Lake Barkley area in these fields right about in here. If we look at the terrain, that is rolling terrain at about the 600-foot elevation. The HH60 in all its variants is an absolute workhorse of the militaries all around the world. If you look at the Aviation Safety Network database, since the machine came out in 1974, they've got 390 occurrences or crash reports over the last, 49 years. So that's an average of about 8 incidents or crashes per year. And if we look at the last couple of years on page 4 here, in just last year, 2022, we had 18 crashes around the world of the airframe, and in 2021, 16 crashes. So, of course, this is also a combat vehicle, so some of these are involved in combat. By far, most of these crashes are during training. As far as military training goes, flying at night under NVGs, especially in a low-level environment, is some of the most challenging training you'll ever get, and its safety record speaks for itself. It's dangerous. Using the NVGs allows you to see the terrain much better at night, but for formation flying, it also has a fairly limited field of view. And as far as formation flying goes with NVGs, these sort of situations can develop incredibly quickly. All it takes is a minor amount of miscommunication or brief loss of situational awareness, and you can come together very quickly. Now, the U.S. Army will do a complete accident investigation on this. They have accident investigation specialists that will get to the bottom of this, but that report generally will not be released to the public. Your best source for Army aviation safety and accident reports is from this publication here, Flight Facts. It's been around for years, and you can get the archive right over here, and I'll see the link below. Flight Facts is available here for the general public. If you're a young aviator considering going into the Army, if you study this Flight Facts magazine before you even get to training, you'll be heads up above all the rest of your peers in training. This is a fantastic safety publication. And somewhere down here, they even go through all the near misses that didn't involve accidents. Individual mishap briefings. These are sanitized reports from the official report. And down here, they'll give you the mishap rate. So remember, Class A mishaps for the military is a crash involving either a fatality or a total hull loss or damage exceeding $2.5 million. So they've got the accident rate here. Remember, we were talking about accident rates as a part of that general aviation survey for general aviation. The military keeps track of it here, and it looks like the 5-year average overall for manned aircraft is a 5-year average of 0.87. Currently, for the physical year of 23, it's at 0.94. So almost one Class A mishap per 100,000 hours of flying time. By matter of comparison here at the NTSB, where they measure it by accidents per 100,000 hours or fatalities per 100,000 hours, U.S. General Aviation for the year 2020 had a little over one fatal accident per 100,000 hours of flying time, and had over 5.5 accidents, overall accidents per 100,000 hours of flying time. Again, flight hours and departures are compiled and estimated by the FAA using the FAA's General Aviation and Part 135 Activity Survey, which we just talked about in the last episode. But comparing military to civilian aviation is a little bit apples and oranges, as we're talking Class A mishaps versus fatalities or general accidents in the civilian world. Meanwhile, for 2020, the airlines had 0 fatalities for the year. Part 121. For example, here in Flight Facts, they do a mishap review of the collision with terrain, the CFIT collision with terrain near Boise, Idaho, that we talked about on this channel before, where they did a risk assessment that seemed unusually low to me given the weather conditions for the flight. And sure enough, the weather deteriorated enough to where the crew needed to do an emergency IMC escape maneuver, but could not outclimb the terrain and impacted the terrain during their emergency IMC or instrument condition escape. Flight Facts also discusses, remember, the formation whiteout collision of the 2 helicopters in Utah near the ski resort that resulted in the destruction of the 2 helicopters. Everybody survived because of an inappropriate approach into deep snowy conditions, resulting in a whiteout and a collision between the 2 aircraft, or at least parts of the 2 aircraft that brought each other down. I was flying parts flying from one aircraft impacting another. Meanwhile, regarding the second most recent Black Hawk accident, which was the Black Hawk that was being vectored for the ILS runway 18 at Huntsville back on 15 February, the more I look into this accident, I initially thought this Nest camera footage, which I can't show because YouTube will demonetize the entire video and channel because of its graphic nature. I first thought that this was looked to me like a straight mechanical problem, but after looking at this a little closer, it looks like this is another case of spatial disorientation where he was getting vectors. He was descending from 4,000 to 3,000 feet, which put him right into these clouds, and while trying to make that left-hand turn to intercept final, he got spatial disorientation and fell out of the clouds, basically inverted. Now, somebody's posted the ATC audio just prior leading up to this crash, and it's the pilot's clipped communication that if you've suffered from spatial disorientation, you will recognize this clipped communication from the pilot. As you can tell, he is just becoming absolutely task saturated.
26, correction guard 24416, descend maintain 3000. Car 24416, leaving 4000 for 3000.
Car 24416, turn left heading 270.
0.
Car 24416, verify level at 3000. Car 24416, radar contact lost 12 miles north of Huntsville Airport.
And that was the last we heard from that helicopter. It was that very clipped 7-0. You could just hear it in his voice that he is task saturated, what we call helmet fire. Learning to fly instruments, that is one of the most challenging parts of learning to fly on instruments, is making that left-hand turn to intercept the final. There's a lot going on right there. There was no Mayday call made on behalf of the pilot or either pilot on that aircraft. They simply just fell out of the sky. So I think this one's going to be chalked up to spatial disorientation. So that's a brief overview of what little we know about the most recent Black Hawk crash, which appears to be a mid-air collision, and some reports on some of the most recent Black Hawk crashes, which gives you an idea of just how dangerous this kind of flying and this kind of work is, and always begs the question, are we giving our Army-trained crews the best training possible? Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible, as it is often demonetized by YouTube because of the nature of the content that we're discussing. Thank you so much for your support. See you here.